Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and updated into modern audio standards. This particular story is called The Filibuster, written by Annex 146. Ambassador Jones sighed as he hung up the phone. He always expected this day to arrive, but it surprised him that it was him they had asked for. Weary from the lack of sleep, partially due to the constant bombings on the surface, he got up with a groan. Exiting his room, one of many, in this vast underground bunker that was all that remained of Canada, he headed to the elevator that would take him to the surface. The halls were rather quiet. What remained of the army was sleeping or trying to hold back the ever-increasing number of invaders. There was no time to loiter around. The chariots had come swiftly, giving humanity almost no time to prepare for the invasion. They must have been observing humanity for some time, as they first struck strategic military bases, greatly diminishing mankind's ability to fight back. Still, humankind had endured, using guerrilla warfare, camouflage, and every tactic in the book. As Jones stood in the elevator, waiting for it to complete that 54-story ascent, his thoughts lingered on his family. The chariots had not spared the thought for human non-combatants. The elevator dinged as it reached the top floor. Jones exited into a cavern, dimly lit to help mask the location, hide these installations. There was only one port of entry, and looking out of it now ached Jones's heart, seeing his country's heartland so devastated. The scarred remains of burnt forests, smoking craters, and a concrete skeleton of a once beating metropolis were all that remained. The war had been going on for nearly 38 years now. Jones had only been a child when it began. Significant progress had been made in technology due to this constant conflict, especially in military technologies. The war had mostly gone in the invaders' favor. The humans had earned a few victories, such as the Battle of New York. Prizes from these wins were salvaged and dissected to gain an advantage and understand the alien tech. Jones knew there were things in the works that he did not have the clearance to know about. A powerful gust of wind cascaded towards Jones, blowing his coat high in the wind. One of the last surviving helicopters descended onto the charcoal-black forest floor. He stepped into its metal cavern and ascended into the skies. Over the horizon, in the wasteland of what used to be northern Quebec, was a grand snow-white dome, the larger structure of the chariots invaders built. He silently wondered why they had chosen northern Quebec, and wondered if it was to slow down any human response. The military aide sitting across from him in his cabin handed a brown envelope over. He quickly opened and read the contents. His face went pale with anxiety, unsure if it is within his means to accomplish. Hours later, they had almost reached the dome. Jones grabbed a pearl from the helicopter and quickly swallowed it. The structure dwarfed anything besides it. The helicopter descended a kilometer away from the dome. The aliens wanted to discuss human surrender. They thought that humanity could not continue, and as a gesture of goodwill, they have stopped advances, though no official ceasefire had been signed. Walking towards the structure, Jones saw alien ships moving to and fro, transporting mysterious cargo inside what looked to be shipping containers. Alien guards watched every corner of every possible hiding spot. He walked up to the entrance where the guard began frisking him for weapons as another handed him a strange device. A translator. The guard explained the rules. Don't interrupt somebody speaking on penalty of death, and the human will get a chance to speak their piece before the Grand Council. Jones walked into the dome and was escorted to a smaller room. Inside was the Grand Council organized into something reminiscent of a parliament back when it was still around. My brothers and sisters, today is the day we have subdued the humans, a military leader exclaimed. Cheers would be heard from the crowd. Now then, human, please entertain us with why we shouldn't demand unconditional surrender, the same alien said towards Jones in disgust and mockery. Well, Jones said, and spoke out, I believe that we should start at the beginning. 200,000 years, Homo sapiens, or humanity, evolved in the plains of Africa. And in those 200,000 years, we've done great things. Major Grant Thomas stood on the bridge of the USS Vanguard. Mankind didn't stay at a standstill throughout the years. Their first fleet had been under construction for decades and was only completed a year ago with the help of alien technology. He looked into the terminal of the command seat and sat down in the chair. This would be humanity's last stand. All hands to battle stations. We are engaging in 3. Only but centuries later, in the plains of Africa, aided by the Nile River, a grand civilization rose and prospered. They built great pyramids of stone and nothing but human ingenuity. Ambassador Jones continued. He peeked at his watch and noted that the speech had been going for just under 2 hours now. The audience was getting uncomfortable and irritated. An alien commander stood up in pure rage and exclaimed, "Enough of this pointless!" A single shot rang out, silencing the dissenter, and splashed its teal blood on his neighbors to their horror. Clearing his throat, Jones continued the speech. He went on to describe construction techniques, how farming originated, and the domestication of animals. Many hours later, he began talking about some of the first great civilizations, the Romans, the Greeks, and the Chinese. He watched with some pleasure how uncomfortable the aliens were, many having soiled themselves where they sat and now having to stay in such positions. Even as half his audience had fallen asleep in their seats, their heads limp and canted to the side, he continued. He talked about the Crusades, our religious wars, and many of the kings that populated the early medieval era. For many centuries, biological horrors haunted us, from the Black Death to tuberculosis. These mercifully killed our people, much like many of you have ordered to be done for decades now. Jones wondered how long these aliens could last. He smiled, as many were trying their hardest to ignore bodily needs. The first fleet hovered just above the enemy fleet, with their commanders away in the peace talks. Many were caught off guard as thousands of explosives dropped from above, instantly rendering many of the enemy ships inoperable. Confused chariot soldiers rushed to escape pods. Command slowly broke apart, while the fleet commander was asleep in the dome. The American Revolution was a point of great patriotism for Americans, while it was a time of great tactical failure for the British colonial army. The speech had been going on for a little over 35 hours now. Every single listener had passed out from exhaustion. Nevertheless, Jones continued. 5 rotations of guards had since passed, making sure Jones continued to speak. The ambassador smirked like a cartoon villain at the thought of the havoc that is being created on the battlefield. Fatigue was slowly getting to him, but he would not fail humanity. Over in Russia, captured chariot spaceships launched from secret places, taking to the skies for the first time in a decade, heading for Earth's orbit. They targeted chariot assets, destroying them as they desperately called for orders but received none. And that is why World War I erupted, according to most historians. I can see many parallels from back then, even today, in this conflict of ours. Neither side is willing to give an inch, everyone suffering because of the decisions of a few. Not learning from our mistakes, we decided to repeat the same thing less than 30 years later. The remains of the American Navy, now with more submarines than carriers, surfaced near New York, launching a barrage of missiles at the enemy garrison. The anti-air defenses proved insufficient, with many finding their marks, inflicting enormous casualties. The 46th hour was upon Jones. Much of his energy was gone, only his willpower and adrenaline pushing him forward. Which brings us to our topic at hand. When we landed on the moon, this was a rather big deal at the time, as we were in a Cold War with the late Soviet Union, attempting to prevent the spread of their ideology. However, it was a great time for innovation and helped spark generations' interest in science. British Special Air Services forces arrived from the charred remains of London. With communications broken down, the occupying chariot soldiers panicked at the sight of human bayonet charges. The proud lieutenant of the chariot forces surrendered, and hundreds of chariot troops were rounded up by mere dozens of SAS men. The Berlin Wall, erected a mere 28 years prior, fell after German Communist Party official Günter Schabowski mistakenly announced the lifting of travel bans permanently, with a famous quote of "immediately, without delay," signaling the collapse of the Eastern Bloc and, by extension, the Soviet Union. By now, the officials hearing him out had long since woken up and was anxious for any type of food. Chinese Type 99 tanks drove alongside South Korean K-808 APVs as Shanghai was quickly overrun and recaptured, much to the Guards' surprise. The battle was quick, lasting a little over 60 minutes as 50 cal machine guns tore through the enemy. All that remained was the teal blood that ran across the cracked pavement. 51 hours had elapsed as Ambassador Jones fought the alluring invitation of sleep, continuing the longest speech ever recorded. Stopping now would likely mean his instantaneous death, and so he pushed on, conjuring words to protect himself. The September 11 attacks were a catastrophe that sparked the American War on Terror. Countless U.S. troops were deployed in the Middle East. And in 2011, the president, then Barack Obama, announced the death of al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, though the war continued. Artillery and gunshots rang out from outside. The screaming of guards could be heard, though no one dared avert their attention to the battle occurring just meters from the dome's entrance. Which brings us to today, Ambassador Jones concluded. Today, on the 5th of August 2025, humanity will witness the defeat of the alien invaders because a filibustering diplomat distracted an alien command. At that comment, dozens of Canadian Special Forces smashed open the doors to the assembly chamber. They instantly pummeled all resistance with a hail of automatic weapons fire, leaving every vital figure at the mercy of humankind. I trust that explains why humanity will not accept unconditional surrender. Ambassador Jones collapsed on the floor as a Canadian soldier rushed to his aid. Soldiers rounded up generals, senators, and other prominent leaders from the alien invasion. It was time to bring the war to their home front. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.